And you'll see it's a huge variety of artwork. And this is one, I think this is true of every show we have, but particularly with this show, these are pieces you need to see in person. And the media are just so varied. So there are video works that you really need to stand in front of and watch the entire video. There are textiles with such amazing textures that you really need to be in front of. There are photographs, and there are mixed media, things like this taxidermied animal here. So all of these, I think, again, the images and the slides don't do them justice. Again, varied artwork, many different artists from across the world, but they all share a very deep commitment to reflecting the experiences of Indigenous peoples with climate change and environmental damage and degradation, whether that's be the effects on food production or cultural dependence or the general well-being of the community. I think the focus is really on the groups that contributed the least to the crisis being affected the most. One of the central pieces in the show is what you're looking at here. This is by a Tlingit artist named Nicholas Galinan, and it's called We Dreamt Death, and it is a massive piece. And this really is, what you're looking at is a hunter's trophy that has been transformed and kind of melts and disappears into a rug. And again, it couldn't be, I think, a more powerful or a fitting image for the bear actually just kind of both wasting away and melting away. This artist is fascinating because he is very interested in what he calls commodification. And again, taking really important parts of the environment and turning them into, whether it's a hunter's trophy or a rug, and what does that look like? And injustices in particular to animals and land and water. This is the piece, as I say, that's the central one for the exhibition. But I want to show you a couple more pieces of this very same artist, Nicholas Galinan's work. Next image, please. This is, again, not in the show, but I thought is so intriguing, I have to show you. This one is called Architecture of Return and Escape. And this is a little hard to see, but what we're looking at is an animal hide, a deer hide, that has then been painted with blue acrylic paint. And what we're looking at is essentially like a map, or what you would get when you walked into a museum, right? A gallery map. And this is actually a gallery map of one of the galleries at the Met. And here, what Galinan is really interested in and wants us to focus on is the idea that many objects sacred to Indigenous cultures are in museums. And they're in places that, again, if you were part of that group, it would be very difficult maybe to access that collection. I think his objection, among many others, is that museums can't, in his words, care for objects in, and I like this phrase, in cultural and spiritual ways. And that in essence, many of these simply just don't belong in these institutions. So that's the point in the vision. But what he's done, I love the name of this piece. The name of this piece is Architecture of Return and Escape. And basically what this is a floor plan for the objects themselves to say, this is how I get out of here. And that's exactly what the concept here, which is really, really interesting. Is again, this is usually would be guiding the museum visitor, but this instead is an escape route to take objects, in his words, that have been stolen or sold under duress and return them home. And again, his phrase, which I really like, for the health of the object and the health of the community. So this is just a really interesting object. And again, this is Nicholas Galinan, and the title is Architecture of Return and Escape. Next image, please. This is another image, same artist, again, not in the show. The polar bear is, but not these two. This one is called Space Invaders. And Nicholas Galinan also works with his brother, Jared, and they also have a kind of an artist collaborative, just the two of them. And they have their own special name when the two of them are working, which is Leonard Get in the Car. So that is the name of their two-person, two-brother collaborative. This piece is really interesting. Again, it's called Space Invaders, and it uses very familiar imagery from kind of the video games of the 1980s, but replaces, again, some of those game elements with teepees and arrows. And the idea here, metaphor here really is in his eyes and in his artistic imagery, the kind of Anglo invasion is the way he sees it. He says the space aliens, in his mind, again, is the invasion of indigenous groups by people who have, again, no relationship to the land and want to simply exploit it for profit. So again, for him, the idea of Anglo settlers are, again, akin to something like an alien invasion to indigenous communities. Next image, please. This is a piece by Frederick McDonald, who will be speaking as part of a seminar on Monday. Again, you can find this online if you want to attend virtually. Professor Ali Kassam has organized the seminar, and the artist Frederick McDonald, who's a woodland Cree artist, is part of this seminar on Monday. This piece is called Autumn Harvest Daily Grind, and he's got a very interesting approach here. You can see at the top this really 2-panel work, but what links the panels is this dark, rich blue band across the top. And again, these swirling cloud forms that are beneath it. McDonald is very interested, and he, in his own words, in this juxtaposition of two different worlds, of a world, again, that you can see on the left, of subsistence farming and hunting, and an intimate relationship with nature, and the world on the right of the petroleum industry. And as he said, many indigenous people employed in the petroleum industry. And he said for a while, he also worked as a pipe fitter. So these two worlds in a very uneasy kind of relationship. What's fascinating about this piece, and you need to see this in person because I don't think we can see it very well on this image, but beneath the dark blue kind of panel of sky, the kind of lighter blue is absolutely swirling with animals and with animal figures. And again, you got to see it really closely. But when you look and when you're in there in person, you can see, ravens and wolves and all of these images of very powerful animals and animals sacred to indigenous cultures that are just swirling in those clouds in the sky. So really interesting textures, but really interesting to see those hidden images in McDonald's work. Next image, please. It's another, and again, really distinctive style. And again, always this kind of balance of contemporary imagery, of traditional imagery, and again, always drawing from really specific images of landscape, of nature, and of specific animals as well. Next image, please. Maureen Grubin is an artist with 2 pieces in the exhibition. One is a video piece that, again, really need to have time to look at that. I've just got one still from it. This is another piece that, again, you really need to see in person to experience it. The piece is called We All Have to Go Someday. Do the best you can and love one another. And what we're looking at is the surface of a deer hide that has been stretched across this form. There are also colored threads and grommets and rivets, but I hope you can also see something that looks a little bit like mapping on that deer hide in that colored thread. And what Maureen Grubin has done is to take her father, who was having open heart surgery at 90, and she took his angiogram and she mapped it on that deer hide. And again, it's such a fascinating idea. She said her father also connected to these ideas of drawn patterns, which he had done, of caribou migration. So in many ways, the hide itself looks like a storied map, but a map with many, many layers. The layer of the deer itself, the migration of the caribou, the father's heartbeat, and his intimate connection and her intimate connection to the land are all a part of this piece. But it's so fascinating, again, because the hide really maps both the body and the land and follows these trails of both animals and kinship as well, which is really interesting. And again, she is always inspired by the little community that she lives in, whether that's, again, processing caribou or finding bones on a beach. These are the things that inspire Maureen Grubin. Next image, please. This is oh gosh, you can see this a lot better here with this detail, which is, again, all of these are so textural that I think it'll help when you see them in real life. Okay, next image. Okay, another one. Again, the colors, the thread, the texture of the hide, all really contribute to the power of this piece in person. Next image, please. She's also got a really kind of amazing and complex and multi-layered video that is part of the exhibition called Stitching My Landscape. And what she's done here, it's fascinating. She has said, she gave a wonderful talk a few months ago as part of the kind of preparation for the exhibition. She said, artists are important, in her words, as activists. She said, it's all about respecting what you have and taking care of it. Each and every one of these artists seems to echo this phrase over and over again: taking care, stewardship of land, of animals, of all things, she says, that help us survive. This piece is huge. It's her first large-scale work of land art, and very much tied to memory and family and healing. And again, remember the name, Stitching My Landscape. And what she did here, she said, it kind of inspired by a memory of being with her brother who was harvesting seal, and then he had taken some of the seal intestines and spread them out on the ice. And so what she's done here is take a huge length of red broadcloth, 1,000 feet, yards and yards of this, and created chiseled little holes in the ice, 111 little holes, and then literally stitched the landscape together, which is such a neat idea. When you see this video, you'll also hear a sound that accompanies the video, and that's the sound of the chisel in the ice. So again, this really has to be experienced. She said, I draw inspiration from and am part of the land. And this idea, I think, is such a powerful symbol of stitching my landscape, of trying to repair two pieces that are coming apart. And this is, again, her visual way to do that. So I recommend this. This is just one little still from the video, which is really fascinating. But she, as an artist, did not want us to embed that video into presentations. You could have a still, but she wants you to experience it in the gallery. So we respect that and just show you one little still preview of coming attractions. Next image, please. Okay, so you can get a little bit better sense of it. And you can get a sense of these big balls of this red broadcloth, and then what it looked like as she stitched across the landscape. Really, really compelling. Next image, please. This is the artist Sonia Kelleher Combs, and she has a couple pieces in the show. And what she's got here is, this is a little piece of moose antler. And she said, growing up in a rural community, and again, this echoes the words that we just heard from Maureen Grubin. She said, I was taught that the land and sea would provide resources. This is interesting, spiritual and physical, necessary to sustain a healthy life. Over and over again, these artists are saying we are out of balance, not just and again, in terms of the land or the economy or quality, or out of balance spiritually as well. They all say because of our relationship to a land we have poisoned. She said, again, this is almost exactly what Maureen Grubin said. She said, we have to take care of one another and do not ever take more than you need. This is really interesting because she's again taken little pieces again of antler and bone and framed them just as if, again, they would be in a museum setting, and also put like a little bit of like polyurethane on it so that it seems a little bit distant from reality. Her subjects are often, again, patterns of history and family and culture in dealing with things like skin and fur and membrane. But she also doesn't give the viewer a kind of a clear view, kind of distances us from the real context of the piece. So it's, again, she's saying, I think that the idea of once you put it in a museum, it has lost that original context. It's just like you're framing a piece of this moose antler. And again, these two have such dimension and presence that we're not doing them justice with a PowerPoint. Next image, please. There is a very powerful photograph by Meryl McMaster. And I'll show you a couple of her pieces, but this is the one that's now in the collection of the Johnson. She is a photographer and a mixed media artist. And one of the things she's interested in is creating costumes and masks to recreate some of these really important legends and narratives. This piece, again, is called Call Me Home. And what she's doing, this is the artist, again, with a costume that she has created. And she is at Lake Diefenbacher in Saskatchewan. And she is portraying herself as a figure called the Buffalo Child Stone. And this connects back to a story of a child who has been lost, has been found by the buffalo, who then raised him. And there is a point in the story where this being has to decide, do I go back to the people who gave birth to me, the humans, and love me, or do I stay with the buffalo who raised me and also cared for me? And not being able to choose between one or another, instead, that buffalo child chose to be transformed into this huge stone. The stone then, again, in Saskatchewan, was sacred to the Cree and was destroyed in the creation by the Canadian government of a man-made lake. So this is a great, great loss. And in many ways, her images are connecting back to that story and the loss of that really important landscape and that stone. Next image, please. I'll show you a couple more McMasters. But every one of these, again, she's making herself the protagonist in these traditional Indigenous tales. In the next image, usually in an important setting, and again, connecting you back to a story and reliving it, but staging it herself, again, through costumes and props. Next image, please. There are also some amazing textiles in the show. And this, now we're moving to another area of the world, to an Uzbek artist named Dilyara Kapova. And I apologize about some of these pronunciations. This one is simply called Danger Signs. And this is a huge weaving, very, very traditional textile technique, which has since been disappearing. But what's interesting here, when you look at this technique, you'll see what we're looking at are symbols of danger and warning. And the idea here is both a concern for traditional handicrafts that are disappearing in the Uzbek culture, but also an allusion to the fact that the Soviets used the region as a kind of a nuclear testing ground and the site of factories that produced chemical and biological weapons. So instead of what we might have traditional patterns, we have patterns, again, that are signaling danger, and that environment has completely been transformed. So really, again, another interesting way to take something very, very traditional, this weaving tradition, and then put in a very, very contemporary message about the destruction of the environment. Next image, please. This is another complicated work that needs to be seen in person. It's a huge, huge photograph by Yi Lan called Nine Dash Line. And this refers to very contentious territorial disputes in the South China Sea. And that region, of course, has been much in the news with military facilities that China is very interested in extending, but in ecologically delicate areas near really important coral reefs. And this photo collage, which again, a very, very large piece, has been made from hundreds of images. And again, can't quite see this in the image, but in person, you can see that it does seem to be stitched together. The photographer made hundreds of images of the South China Sea over the last 10 years, and then digitally stitched them together, again, to show us the effects of this changing world in an ecologically very, very delicate area. Next image, please. Okay, these again, gotta see them to believe them. This is a Javanese artist named Mulyana, and what we're looking at is a textile piece. Mulyana is an expert not just in crochet and knitting, but in finger knitting as well. And one of the things that he does is get viewers to think about the health and the condition of the coral reefs. In Indonesia, it's home to 1/5 of the world's coral reefs. And he's very, very concerned about the damage to these reefs. So what we're looking at in this piece is a dead or a dying coral reef. They're threatened, of course, by acids, by land-based pollution, plastic waste, and destructive fishing. And what he's given us are these kind of dead, gray, lifeless colors of a reef that is not doing well at all. And this has great, great dimension. So this is projecting out from the wall of the gallery. But it's really, really fascinating, again, that we have seen artists working with hide and bone and taxidermied animals and textile, as well as photography and painting, and here knitting and crochet and finger knitting to, again, help viewers to be aware of the condition and the situation with coral reefs. I'll show you the next one. I think might be another one of Mulyana's. We're going to go to the next image. Yeah, okay. So you can get a sense, the detail is absolutely incredible on these pieces. And I don't think looking at that in an image really gives you any sense of what it's like in person, but to see it hanging on the wall and projecting out of the wall is quite incredible. And what you can do, again, with traditional crocheting and knitting to create these is pretty extraordinary. And again, Mulyana doesn't just do the reefs, but always works in this kind of combination of knitting, crocheting, and finger knitting, which the artist refers to as a very meditative process to create work in this way, and a very spiritual one. I think I've got one more. Next image, please. Okay, another detail, which again, it's kind of hard to believe what has been created. Textile arts here, and I think there might be one more. Next image, please. Okay, and this one, I believe that obviously a much healthier reef with the colors reflected, but extraordinary. This is a fascinating artist, and one, if you don't know, would be good to explore a little bit more. As I say, the exhibition takes you all around the world. And I don't think we've had too many exhibitions with as varied a sense of media as this one. The next image is a Mongolian piece. Next one, please. Called On the Road. And this is a little bit hard to see, but this piece refers to changing cultural identity of Mongolians. And again, the idea that because of changes in the climate, traditional herding, which would have been a key way to support yourself, has become less and less viable. More and more people are moving to Mongolia's capital and urban centers. And this has literally, I don't know if you can see these creatures stacked one on top of each other, upended traditional centuries and centuries of nomadic tradition. with great disorientation in terms of both the environment and culture. I think I've got another image that'll give you a sense of the stacking. Okay, they all are stacked on top of each other. And again, rich sense of pattern, and just all of these really need to be seen in person. And I hope you will look at them all in person. And I think I've got another one to show you. Next image, please. Benson Norbu crossing the pass, bringing home the salt. And again, just this is a piece that has been in the collection for a very long time. And again, reminding us of those intimate connections between community, the land, what we get from the land, and preserving it. And this is, again, used to be a favorite up on the 5th floor. And I think Ellen rightly has put this right next to the one we just looked at, the other Mongolian piece. Next image, please. I'm going to show you one more artist, and that is Abel Rodriguez, who is a Colombian artist from Amazon. Fascinating artist, very interested in the stewardship of knowledge and nature and the power of memory. He is a respected elder and a healer in his community. And in his youth, he studied, and this piece is called Tree of Life. He studied plant lore with an uncle, and again became a kind of a knowledge keeper. And one of the things he did during his training was a spiritual exercise in which he would stay awake many nights in the forest and just observe and listen and absorb as much as he could. And interestingly, then the drawings, he said he had never drawn before when he started to draw. He said, I barely knew how to write. This is interesting. He said, I'd never drawn before. I barely knew how to write, but I had a whole world in my mind asking me to draw the plants. And again, this is one that is so detailed that you have to see to believe. He sees this work. Now, this is fascinating too, less as works of art than as works of knowledge, and really wants the global community to have a better understanding, again, of the richness and the diversity of the Amazon. This piece, if you look at it up close, you can see that what he's done in this Tree of Life is combine the leaves and the characteristics of many different plants and trees. And that you can think and look a little closer, and all of a sudden you see, multiple kinds of leaves, and you see a pineapple in the tree and all kinds of different things. So this is one that you really have to look up close. At the base of the tree is the teeniest, tiniest little axe, which is, again, the idea of our human capacity both to cultivate, but also to have destructive potential as well. And I love the idea of all these different creatures beneath the tree, the idea of dropping fruits and seeds that nourish everything that is below it. Next image, please. I think they've got you can see a little bit more closely the pineapples and trees and some of the animals, including, I believe, a tapir beneath the tree. But I love the idea that not thinking of this as a work of art, but a work of knowledge. So quite fascinating. And I've thrown in just a couple more of his because he is so fascinating, just to show you Abel Rodriguez's, the rest of his next one, please, body of work. Again, that same style of, again, knowing that he wants to reflect the richness of this area and show you something of his world. But again, I love the idea that he is a knowledge keeper and not an artist. Not an artist. I think there's just one more to show you. Maybe next one, please. Got one more image. Next one. Oh, maybe it's not. Have we got one more? Okay, maybe we don't. I thought we might have one more Rodriguez here.
To be frozen.
Okay. Am I frozen?
Oh, now you're not. Now you're.
Okay. Yeah, that's someday we'll say. We won't say anymore. You're frozen. I'm not frozen. Okay. I think maybe there's one more, Cassie. just give you a sense of his work. Oh, no, we're done. We'll just go right back to the last tree. Am I frozen? Okay, we'll go right back. Yeah, we'll go back to the last tree. Well, Abel Rodriguez. We'll go back. Yep. Yeah, I just want to end with him. I think each and every one of these pieces, I think, is a world unto itself. And in it, maybe a different way than some of the other exhibitions. Each one introduces you to a culture, to a way of life, and again, to a way of respecting nature and living with nature that I think is certainly not the norm. But I think each one makes us reflect on nature and the process and our relationship to it in a way that I think is very, very powerful. I am hoping that each one of you will come to see this in person when you can. It'll run, I think, to mid-December. As I say, Andy Weissegel will do a much longer version of this because I've kind of given you the highlights. But again, many of these need to be experienced in person. You need to stand in front of the Maureen Grubin video and see all of Stitching My Landscape, or really see the pieces in person. I would encourage you too, if you're interested, to again look on the website. There's a wonderful website just for this show that exists on the Johnson website. So it's just called, Art and Environmental Struggle. And if anybody is interested, the seminar on Monday is absolutely open to the public. So if you look at the Johnson website, it'll tell you related programs. And I think you can go to just about any of those virtually. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, I would like to thank you for a wonderful introduction to this exhibit.
My pleasure.
And I'm ready. I'm waiting for my daughter to come to see this one, but maybe I'll go first and then go twice because it looks like there's a lot to absorb. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Barbara. And Barbara, you brought up a good point too, just something to think about. That Cornell break is coming up this weekend. So this might be a really good time to come to campus. Everybody is out Friday through Tuesday, I think. So it should be nice and quiet and lots of parking. So this weekend might be a great time to go where you don't have to deal with crowds such as they are. So something to think about. That's my hot tip. Anybody else? If not, I am delighted to see you all, and I'll look forward. I know we've got another hot date
In December.
in December.
Yeah.
I will look forward. And thank you,
so
Cassie, so much for all of your help.
Carol. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you all.